What's up, everyone? Sebastian here. Kind of a different style video, as you can clearly see. I have a new setup, which is very professional. I am fully ready to get on camera, talk to people, and clean out their life savings. Not really. Maybe a little bit. The topic of this video that I wanted to put together today was the idea of being your authentic self and wearing masks. You've probably heard of some variation of this somewhere else, but it came to me yesterday as I was speaking with a friend of mine who I'm sharing this office space with here in Mexico. And we were talking about how lately I am still in sales, I am still in remote closing, and the longer that I spend in this industry, the more jaded I become. I think anyone who spends any amount of time in a certain industry long enough to see both the good and the bad, and also how different people conduct themselves when they're at work, will start to get jaded to some degree. You'll start to notice patterns and things that you did not sign up for, that you don't want anything to do with, but regrettably, in order to stay in the game and not make too many waves and rock the boat, you're not supposed to talk about it, or you're supposed to just bear it. Grit your teeth and suck it up. Yes, man. Yes, sir. And we can equate that to wearing a mask, because if you have to do even a little bit of that in your day-to-day in order to fulfill a very important function like making money, keeping a roof over your head, feeding yourself, that's not really something you want to be doing, is it? I don't think any man with an ounce of self-respect wants to live that kind of lifestyle. But unfortunately, when you're starting from the bottom and your parents didn't really educate you, they didn't prepare you to venture out into the world and really stake your own claim, not have to follow the same cookie cutter path that so many other people do. And as we can clearly see nowadays, it is not the way. That's not to say that it's completely wrong, and society needs those people. You need people to put up this backdrop, to make this chair, to assemble this computer or this phone that you're watching the video on. So society requires a certain amount of people to fulfill those roles. And when you decide that you don't want to do that, that you feel like you're above it, don't be surprised if a lot of people are going to think that you're arrogant, and they're going to attack you, because the fact is a lot of people don't want to see others rise up in this world, especially when it threatens their ego, their own sense of self-worth, and puts their decision-making and their life into question. I've touched on this before. Again, as I mentioned, other people have talked about this as well. But today, I really wanted to focus on this concept of wearing those masks, of what you're willing to tolerate. Because if you really want to play certain games at a high level, you are going to be wearing a mask a lot until you get to such a high level where, well, you can take it off and almost suffer no repercussions. I want to make sure, though, that there's a clear distinction between being your authentic self and talking about things that ultimately will lead to more negativity and more of a negative impact on your life than it will a positive one. So, for example, in 2026, considering all of the world and geopolitical events that are taking place lately, especially when it comes to war and the Middle East and the United States and what have you, there's quite a few people who are waking up and looking at certain historical figures who had a fantastic gift for oration, bringing people together for a noble cause, and standing his ground to the very end, until supposedly committing suicide in Europe. Hopefully, I've given you enough clues to determine who that is that I'm speaking about. There's a famous celebrity, a famous rapper who has been quite shunned recently in popular media because of coming out in favor of this historical figure. And so that's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He was a little bit more insulated because, I mean, he's got plenty of money. And it's going to be very difficult for Kanye West to really go downhill. And there's no HR department that's going to fire him or make it so that he can't get a job. It's not his reality. But it is reality for a lot of other people, a lot of normal, everyday people who don't have that celebrity status or that wealth or that insulating cushion to protect them from the backlash that their opinions will generate. So what I'm trying to say here, just to kind of bring it full circle, is that you don't have to go around telling every single person in person or on social media about your deepest, darkest views and things that you are vehemently against or that you proudly support, unless you're ready, like really prepared and have thoroughly considered the consequences of those actions. Because once you start, there is no going back. Once you put something up on social media, on the internet, it stays there forever. Whether you delete it or not, it's there somewhere. Someone screenshotted it. Some three-letter agency has a record of it, whether you believe that or not. And so, with that in mind, in order to get ahead in this world without lucking out, without having bought Bitcoin 8, 10, 15 years ago, without having rich parents and an abundance of connections in high places, you are going to have to wear a mask to some extent. You're going to have to put aside your desire to express your deepest opinions on certain things, unless, again, you're fully ready to suffer the consequences. And the thing is, you probably don't want to start doing those things until you have built your cushion and your barrier. For example, you could consider the fact that I'm here in Mexico now as a barrier to any kind of backlash for me speaking up against what is happening in Canada right now. I made one video that went, I'm not going to say it went viral, but for a relatively new YouTube channel like mine at the time, it garnered 30, maybe even 40,000 views at this point. The highest viewed video on my entire channel by a long shot. Why would that be? Well, because there's a lot of people in 2026, Canadians and others alike, who share those opinions and who are interested in that kind of content and want to hear from someone who's unfiltered and raw about it. That's not something I can scrub. That's there. If people really want to dig and find it, they can, and they can learn about what some of my views are, which generally are not politically correct. And if I'm not mistaken, now in 2026, the government of Canada has passed legislation that literally criminalizes you being able to say certain things about stuff you don't like, which, in my mind, is a massive middle finger to the concept of free speech. No one ever said anything about freedom from consequences, but if you want to talk about how you hate a certain political figure or a religious group or what have you, you should be allowed to do that. And people should be allowed to dislike that as well. Now, when it comes to physical violence and escalating and bodily harm, that's not something I condone. So, at least that's what I say on YouTube. I don't want to make this a rambly video. In short, the idea here is be ready to put on your mask. Be ready to wear it for as long as you really need to until you reach your goals. So in my case, I don't have to wear such a mask because in the space that I'm part of and in the trajectory I'm going in, I'm going to be fully autonomous. I'm going to be so protected. I'm going to have built a moat around my freedom of expression that people can try to dox me. People can try to block my payment processors or what have you. And I will still find a way, because in this day and age, you do have to speak truth to power. But of course, you have to be smart about it. If you spoke up 5 years ago, 4 years ago, with this bat thing that was going around the whole world, supposedly, you were deplatformed. You were debanked. The powers that be did not want to let your voice be carried even just one step outside of the four walls of your dwelling. They did not want other people to learn about the alternative views on what was happening. They wanted the mainstream to have a hegemony, to have a monopoly over what everyone was thinking and the way they were acting. And so that's their tactic, right? Because they know they can't silence you. They know they can't refute what you're saying. So they try every single technique they can to vilify you, to scrub you, and make sure that no one can hear what you have to say. It's not new. It's been done. You read the book 1984 by George Orwell. This is exactly what's happening. And what's even scarier is that work of fiction was required reading in high school a few years ago when I was in school. God, when was that? Over 10 years ago now. And yet so relevant. The book is even older, right? I think it was released in 1948, if I'm not mistaken. Point being is, the younger you are, the more relevant this is going to be for you, because you might think that you can just talk about whatever you want. I mean, you can. And if you really want to take a gamble and try to become famous and make money off of being controversial, all the power to you. But for the vast majority of guys, that's probably not going to happen, at least not immediately. And so you are better off wearing a bit of a mask. The question is, do you have a plan for when you're going to be able to finally take it off, breathe a breath of fresh air, and get to be yourself fully? Because at the end of the day, how important is having all the money in the world and the cars and the houses if you cannot just be yourself? You cannot just say no to things that you don't want to do, people that you don't want to speak to, environments that you don't want to be in. If you don't have that power, and you don't need that much money to have this power, but if you don't, again, what good is all that money? What good is all that supposed status and influence if you are still needing to put on the mask and live for other people at the risk of them pulling the plug, saying, okay, you're done. You're done. You're irrelevant now. Or even worse, you go from top celebrity to public enemy number one. So with that said, like I mentioned from the beginning, this isn't exactly a new concept. The people who watch my videos, you're probably fairly astute, especially if you're watching up to this point. You understand what it means to act accordingly based on the environment, based on the person who's in front of you shaking your hand, and what's at stake, a sale, a job, whatever it is. But the point of this video is just so you ask yourself, how much longer do you want to do that for? You want to do it forever? Does that make you uncomfortable? To think that this could be forever? It scares the fuck out of me. So that's why I took, some would say, the massive risks that I've taken in the past 6 years now to get away, to get out, to move away, and find alternatives. So that's it, guys.